Hello. So, welcome to the Team Coaching Zone podcast. I am so pleased to have this conversation with my dear friend, somebody who has taught me so much about team coaching. Has been a great partner to learn with, to practice with, and more recently, your doctorate. Congratulations, Dr. Colm Murphy.
Yeah.
So I think today is going to be a great conversation about bringing together the world of practice and research, which is really needed in the whole field of team coaching. But I am sure, and before we do wider and bigger introductions, I am sure our audience are very interested and curious about the title, The Wild, the Innocent, and the Team Coaching Shuffle.
You kindly text me. Hi, everybody. Hi, Melissa. You texted me a few days ago for a title for this, and I am in pre-Springsteen mode. So myself and Bruce are going to get some time together next Friday in Dublin. I think there may be some other people there on the occasion, and actually I'm going again. So I started off not going at all because the price of the tickets felt crazy, and now I'm going twice to see him, and there's a sense of, what is he, 73? Might be my last time seeing him. And I first saw him when I was 13, a place called Slane Castle, my first big concert. And the title, his second album, which bombed totally, and he came close to losing his contract, was called The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. So I guess I was thinking of Springsteen. Maybe there's something in here that there's certainly been innocence in my team coaching practice. I think you've been with me on that, where we're very purist at times, and we've had some highs and some lows. So maybe a loss of innocence in those last few years. There is a wildness to what we do. We all do, which is, it's an exploration, and it's very much a journey. So never knowing what's going to come up, and the idea of a team coaching shuffle, I guess I'm still learning those steps, and even with the research or in practice, what I'm doing now is different to what I did 6 months ago, which is different again to a year ago. So you're always shuffling, I think. So it was a combination of things. So go out there. I think Bruce needs the money. Go out there and buy the CD.
Absolutely. And of course, straight off the bat, something that you've always brought to your work and how you engage is that touch of humor and the ability to bring a smile and a laugh to those that you're working with. I guess, where do we even start in the story of The Wild, the Innocent, and the Team Coaching Shuffle? First of all, what I want to do is I want to make the connection to you and the Team Coaching Zone podcast. Share a little bit about what I know of you, but not in a way of reeling off your kind of LinkedIn profile. I hope that's okay, and I say the right things. But then really to kind of hand over to you to kind of even reflect on what it is I'm saying about you as team coach, you as an educator, you as a researcher, and where we might unpack the conversation. My only concern is that there's so much to talk about that we might not fit it into the time we have. But if that's the case, we can always do a part 2. Back in 2015, 2016, I think it was, Krister Lowe, the founder of the Team Coaching Zone podcast, invited the two of us on to talk about team coaching, but also to talk about this journey that we were embarking on, which was our doctoral research in the area of team coaching. With you looking at the whole area of the contribution of team coaching to team effectiveness, and me taking a different direction. I want the focus of this discussion to be solely on you. And I think what we've agreed is that when I'm ready to talk about my research, which is hopefully not too far down the tracks, you will take over the podcast, be the host, and we'll have another iteration of this conversation. So I guess that's the starting point, something to alert our listeners to, that you, congratulations, you have your doctorate in team coaching, one of the few out there that have undertaken doctoral research in this area. So there's the contribution to theory and practice to discuss. There is how you and I met, which interestingly we're both in Dublin. We're both practicing here in Ireland and of course around the world, but we met in London, not in Ireland, and we met when we were taking the Peter Hawkins 16-month diploma in team coaching, and that was kind of the beginning of our professional relationship, our friendship, and we went on this kind of crazy, wild team coaching shuffle together, right? So I'm going to hand over to you to kind of pick up the story of you as the team coaching practitioner, going off as a student to learn more about this whole area, then evolving that into your doctorate, your practice now. Where do you want to begin? What do you want our listeners to know to begin with?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm going to lay all the blame on you because I had never thought about doing that. I was quite a happy ex-accountant. The pinnacle of any adult development is getting your accountancy qualifications. What else is there? And we were probably having a drink one night in Heathrow, stroke Windsor, stroke somewhere else. And I think we were influenced also by the work of Catherine Carr and Jacqueline Peters, because Peter had Hawkins to supervise them and they had done a DBA together. I think that began to interest us of working together. But so the DBA is different to PhD. For me, it's very much, it's research on your practice. It's also a few thousand words less of a thesis, but is that scholarly practitioner. And I guess the motivation for me was I was developing a team coaching practice, hence I was on that program with you. But if somebody was asking me, well, does this make a difference? I was very much going, I think so. Yes, people seem happy, but there was no sense of, did I really trust the efficacy of team coaching? Was I just making it up as I go along? Was I grabbing a bit of facilitation? Was I grabbing a bit of coaching skills, grabbing a bit of team development, team building? So what? Did this matter? And that felt like a big gap. It felt with one-to-one coaching, by the time I started doing that in, say, 2008, it felt like the research proved that there was an impact of one-to-one coaching, but there's this gap for me in team coaching. And so that's the heart of what I was setting out to do, was to try and look at one potential measure of team coaching, which is how does it contribute and what's the relationship to team effectiveness, so that there might
were your clients asking you for this team coaching? Because I'm conscious of, you started out in a company introducing this whole idea of coaching and a coaching culture into, was it Symantec? Was my memory correct?
I used to work with Symantec,
yeah.
Antivirus,
and we're leaders in there asking you, okay, that's great working with me, but what about working with teams? What kind of brought you into the whole interest or curiosity about team coaching?
Yeah, and it's funny. It's probably been, that ask wasn't there, and it wasn't through. I mean, there would be the classic, can you do a Myers-Briggs or the team building day? But the idea of, this is 2008, certainly in my world, team coaching wasn't a consideration. What actually triggered for me was I was a part of faculty running a executive coaching program, a 16-day postgraduate program at a university here in Ireland. And as part of every workshop, we would have what we called an EI lab. I guess T group would be another way to explain it, where we put away all the pencils and pens, we put away all the slides, and we sat around in a circle, and we just had unstructured time for an hour and invited anybody to kind of share something about themselves or notice something about others. And often, well, there was always dynamics playing out there. I remember sitting there trying to hold that space going, I'm not sure I really understand what's going on here. What are the dynamics? Why is that person speaking on behalf of everybody else? What's going on between those two? What is the dynamic that's happening out here. So that was really, it was less about getting to understand team coaching, but more about I wanted to understand groups. And then I noticed this thing called team coaching was happening. Peter was driving and David and other people. So it wasn't so much a demand. I think for me, and I know what's like for others, there's probably still a gap of me having a view of this is important and teams are underinvested in, underdeveloped, versus here's the demand I'm seeing from clients. And it just may vary from country to country, but I've seen a big gap. And I think you and I have had conversations, and I certainly have felt like, am I mad? Am I driving something that nobody wants? Because there's been times where you would have those conversations and it's like, yeah, no thanks. Or you might do a session or two and then the client, the team would disappear on you. And there's been bruising along the way. I talk about that innocence where, teams and leaders will turn on us sometimes if they're too disrupted. But what I'm even noticing the last 6 months is almost that demand is now outpacing what I'm trying to drive. And I don't know if that's just a local Irish thing or if others are seeing it globally. I've just noticed like a switch has been hit where the challenge of having to try and convince people what team coaching is and why it might be useful has kind of gone away a bit. And again, I don't know what you think, Melissa. One hypothesis might be, is it some kind of reaction after COVID? I've worked with a lot of teams who said, we did really good work as a leadership team over COVID. We came together, we bonded, we got on it, we made tough decisions. And they're almost trying to get that back again when we don't have the crisis. And so I'm wondering, is that driving an awareness of this team could be more than it is? I guess the other thing I'm noticing is just a sense of new leaders coming in. So maybe the existing leaders held on till COVID was done, and now we're seeing new CEOs. And with that transition, maybe more comfort with the idea of team coaching or a greater sense of I need a team around me. And maybe we're seeing more leadership style. But so a long answer to your question, it wasn't necessarily demand I was hearing. I probably felt at times I was trying to drive the demand with my clients, not always successfully, but it was that curiosity about what's going on in teams. And maybe also, I really love one-to-one coaching, but that maybe slight frustration of I'm working with one person at a time. Imagine you could have that
one
impact.
leader at a time.
You could have that impact with a team and think about part of the heart of your thesis and research is what's that kind of positive virus that might spread out when a team goes through team coaching.
True team coaching. That's really interesting. And I'd like us to come back to what might be driving that demand, like that switch that you described, because I think that is something to dive into more and something that our listeners will definitely be interested. And, even if our listeners wanted to pop in the comments as to what they're noticing is driving team coaching conversations, requests for or need for if you're a leader, and not often or not always calling it team coaching, right? So sometimes they're calling it something else, and that's okay too. But before we get into where we are today and what the world of work might need from folks like you and I in these times, tell us a little bit more about this journey into your team coaching practice. What influenced you as a team coach practitioner in terms of what different theories and things were you pulling on, how that evolved, what you might pull on now, and maybe then start introducing how your research starts informing how you think about practice. So I think it'd be lovely for the listeners, because we are talking 10, 12 years ago that this journey has evolved, right? So I think it'd be interesting just to hear about, the changes in you as a team coach as you were gaining momentum in the space and building up your practice and your art.
And as you say, 10 years, I'm thinking I'm probably the most unreliable witness you can have, because I'm not even sure I can remember yesterday. So this could all be constructed in my head. I mean, obviously the work of Peter Hawkins was a key influence. Both you and I did a program with Peter that I remember thinking that whole thing about systemic and systems and actually driving myself crazy looking for a book on systems. I remember saying to Peter, where can I read about this? And he gave you that kind of wise but kind of, you sad fool look to me. Well, it's not written in a book, right? You have to You have to go out there and experience it a bit. So that whole idea of systems, the idea of, the stakeholder voice, that was really a bit of a light bulb moment. Um, I was smiling when you were talking about us being on a program together, because in classic parallel process, as a group of participants, we were probably highly dysfunctional. I think there was a kind of rebellion in day one over the quality of the carpet in the venue. So all the things we were trying to practice on, we didn't even have as a group. I'm not sure, there's a lot of psychological
Mm.
between some and others. So that's always
Mm.
interesting when you're trying to learn something and experience the opposite. So Peter was an influence. My background as a coach was influenced by Peter Bluckert and Dr. Jeff Pelham, very much Gestalt therapist, Gestalt coaching, which is a lovely
Mm.
marrying together, because at the heart of Gestalt is experimentation, it's working in the here and now, it's use of self. So I think that was a nice marrying across the team coaching. Those real pivotal moments is when we often do interrupt the flow and use ourselves as the instrument of change, or observe or share back or share the feeling or name what might be in the room. And I think you and I have had some of those moments where there's almost that tension of we said something and how does it land, but noticing how it is
Mm.
be with the team. So Gestalt, Peter was there. I think thinking of adult development as a lens, I probably very much started off as wanting to be the expert, and you're trying to swallow books. And I see that a lot as I teach coaching programs, GTCI, or previously at a university. I think especially one-to-one coaches, they come with a huge appetite of give me the toolkit, give me the
Yeah.
books, give me the references.
Yeah.
I'm going to swallow all this. And what happens is, in the expert mode, they forget about the relationship side. And the idea
Yeah.
that actually we have a decent toolkit already. Yes, there's some process and some thinking, but they almost get too caught into give me the expertise. So I very much started as wanting to be an expert. The achiever in me came through as well, always wanting the team coaching to be a success, to be a certain number of sessions, which just doesn't happen all the time. So it's okay if the team disappears after a while. If you've done good work,
Mm.
maybe they've had enough. So I think there's probably been a bit of adult development. How do I get to that more redefining transformational level? And even that's where my journey is now, is working with Peter again recently on GTCI, that challenge of, as a redefining adult development, I might notice and share those noticings, but that's just putting stuff back in the room and raising awareness. His challenge to me and others is to be truly transformative, is very much maybe at times being more prescriptive, asking the questions that nobody has the
Yeah.
answer to. And really, if we think about in our lives, that big shift doesn't happen from more information. It happens here. And if I
Yeah.
could show my gut, probably for public health reasons, I can't, but it's down here as well. So, but how can I, as a coach, be that way? Because there was times where I probably even, never mind expert, I wanted to be the opportunist. I want to be liked. Maybe I still
Mm.
do want to be liked,
Mm.
but I want to
Mm.
be liked by the leader. I want to be liked by the team. So I think there's been tools and process and experience, but I think there is an adult development arch for all of us. Does that resonate with you as well in your practice?
It 100% resonates. And, as I look back on our experience of working together as team coaching practitioners, naturally enough, at different stages of our development, we were in different phases of our individual development. And then you have to take on board, and how does that then show up in front of a room of leaders, or a team? But I noticed you left out our wonderful trip to the monastery in Spain, where we learned all about this adult development theory from the wonderful Bill Tolbert. I just mentioned that in case any of our listeners are wanting to dive more into understanding what do we mean by the opportunist, and
Mm.
wanting to be expert. So Bill Tolbert would be the person to look into. Action Inquiry, the 7 stages of transformational leadership. But
Another reference to people is Nick Petrie from Center of Creative Leadership, who takes these ideas and maybe writes them in a slightly more accessible way as well.
way, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's an interesting idea for us as individual coaches and team coaches. And I know that Peter and one of my colleagues, Sue Coyne, are actually doing some work on the adult development of the team. And again, that isn't just
Wow.
the sum of the parts, but actually seeing, and again, it's about range. I think when I first heard about adult development, it was very much presented as here's the hierarchy. The person presenting it was very much, you're all here. And guess what? Didn't say it, but the assumption was they were way up there somewhere. And when I
Yeah.
talked to Bill about that, he was saying, well, that isn't what this is about. It's about range. There's times that I
Yeah.
need to be the
Yeah.
expert and I need
And
to be the opportunist, but do I have range? I think
yeah.
as a coach, that's a lovely image for all of us as team coaches is when are we out? When are we in? When are we present or driving the conversation? When are we stepping back? I think we're very much that Constantina approach is probably the core of team coaching.
I think it would be interesting as well to get your perspective on, this idea of being comfortable enough to step in as expert in a team coaching engagement, given that for a lot of us, when we went through our executive coaching training, we were almost told, well, don't do that. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your experience of developing the capacity to be able to step in as expert or to provide more directive coaching vis-a-vis your gestalt, which would be driving you more to allow it to emerge, and the tensions between these two different ways
Mm,
of thinking and being and working with teams.
mm. And it's still a developing capacity for me because my default is to stay in coach mode and ask the question. But the
Mm.
question just creates, and which is really useful, creates more reflection. But when there's 7 or 8 people, that reflection may not create the shift. So examples again is getting people. Here's a classic example. I was working with a community of practice, and we were talking about these different ways of intervening. And we were saying, imagine you get in front of your local government and the topic is the ecological disaster.
Mm.
And what they don't need is more reports. We all have enough reports coming out of our
More
ears.
facts and yeah.
So Peter would always say to me, yeah, no one changes because of facts. What would be the intervention? You got whatever your government system is, ministers or presidents or whoever else, they're in this room, they're filled up with reports, and you've got a chance to maybe do something with them where it's going to really shift their thinking. And again, it can be prescriptive. And what this group of team coaches came up with was a whole range of stuff, and they got really creative. Like, okay, well, let's bring their grandchildren into the room. Now
Mm.
suddenly personal. I mean, the politicians' grandchildren and
Yeah.
have a conversation between you as decision makers for our environment and these children. Or it might be asking them, you're going to be interviewed by the national broadcaster in 5 years' time, and to reflect upon this moment. What would you want to be
Mm.
saying? So again, shifting their lens. Peter has a lovely idea of how do you shift the frame. And so
Mm.
sometimes just shifting that frame, the way we always do it, you do have to be more prescriptive and get in there. If I'm just asking more and more questions, in a way, I'm staying in the frame that they already have. And
Yeah.
so whether it's going future back, whether it's bringing other people in, I had a session just a couple of weeks ago with a leadership team who are really struggling with a new board. The board are much more demanding. The
Mm.
leadership team used to be members of the board. Interesting enough, now they're not. So there's lots of bruising around that. But one of the big shifts, they were talking about what they wanted to do, and I got one of them to go and sit at a different circle of chairs and be a board member. And his feedback to the team as a board member shifted the room again, saying, "If you come to me with that, I think you're just complaining." And so,
Mm.
how do we get to shift perspectives? I think so. And sometimes you have to be directive. Let's stand up. You're the chairperson. You're going to be a board member. You're representing the team. What do you want to say? So
Mm.
it's not prescriptive of me telling them what to do, but I think it's being more directional in the intervention at times.
Yeah.
Is that
So yeah, no, it makes sense, and I know that that's some kind of stakeholder work that you and I have done with teams as well, where we're inviting them into, there's some kind of transition going on in the organization. What might this new management structure require of us, need of us, and trying to almost prepare through embodying what a stakeholder might want or need or expect from a team. So I think that's really helpful, I guess. So we're hearing all these different strands of your executive coaching, leading you into thinking about group dynamics and teams, building on that through your the team coaching diploma with Peter, your Gestalt training. And then, of course, you moved into the role from being somebody that's out there practicing team coaching to being a researcher of what is actually going on in this whole world of team coaching, what's happening when we're working with teams. And then also educating other practitioners to become team coaching, and pioneering in that regard. And so far as the course that you designed at UCD Smurfit, one of the first programs to be recognized and accredited around the whole area of team coaching education. So we might come back to you as educator, and I know you're working with Peter now in terms of a new program that the two of you have designed and developed together. But let's dive into the research part. So if we go back to that drink that you and I had in a Heathrow hotel as we were on this course, and we start grappling with this whole idea of practice. And I think we were spurred into getting a case study, weren't we? And working not together, but individually, as making sure that in order to pass this course, you needed to work with a team and apply what you were learning with a real team. And I think that kind of started this conversation about, yeah, great, but what if we could do something a bit more and bring our own curiosities to the whole area of team coaching. So do you want to tell a little bit about the background to embarking on a team coaching study, what you decided to research, so your kind of research questions and objectives, and then the journey you went through to arrive at some of your findings, which I think others will find absolutely fascinating. So talk us through a little bit of that journey and what it required of you.
What did it require of me? Learning a new language. So reading and writing academic papers and writing them is definitely akin to moving to a foreign country for me anyway. So, and even the learning over time that, how not to let the editor in my head get in the way of the writer, and even seeing writing as not the product, but as a way of thinking, just to get things out there, and then you can work. So there's that piece. It definitely, doing any kind of doctoral or master's work, I think my critical reasoning has gone up as well, because you begin to realize there is a lens. Doesn't mean it's right, but an academic lens is has this been peer reviewed? Has it been researched? Where it's been published? And begin to notice that maybe as practitioners, with team coaching, the practitioner publications far outstrip the scholarly publications, and that's okay. That's a natural thing. But as I read various books on team coaching, always interesting. But I think there's more a view of now, well, where did that come from? And even something like Patrick Lencioni, great model, 5 dysfunctions. We all know it. We all see clients really engage with it. But just to be aware, there's no research behind it. Does that make it any less? Maybe not. If it's a model that helps frame a discussion and people get it, that's great. But it is what it is, right? There's no, it's a fable. There's no research behind it. And so I think that critical reasoning, which we need now more than ever in all aspects of life, because just trying to figure out what's real and what isn't is so difficult. That was really useful. I think in doing any doctoral work, what you're trying to do is figure out what's in the literature at the moment and where's the gap. So the whole idea is what's going to be your contribution. And looking at the team coaching literature, it was very practitioner led. Okay, so lots of books around team coaching, much more books than academic articles. But also began to notice a few gaps, right? So some of the gaps was where there was actual research of team coaching in the field. It was very much focused usually on leadership team. So that gave me an idea of, let's not go down leaderships. What about other types of teams? Could I see if team coaching has an impact on, and in the end, two of us ended up doing the field work together, and we had a project team, we had an operations team, and a management team. So trying to explore, did team coaching have applicability elsewhere? The other thing was, what were people finding? And often what was happening in the research of case of team coaching, a lot of it was very much focused, and still is, on the team coach. So some really great papers out there looking at what do team
Yeah.
coaches do, the competencies. It's really a great contribution, but I was very keen to hear the voice of the team members. What did they
Yeah.
make of this? But then
What
by
are they
extension,
experiencing?
some papers had team members, but what they didn't have was stakeholders. Again, as I'm
Mm.
designing my research, I'm thinking, okay, I want to do a few different types of teams. I definitely want team members to be not just participants, but fellow researchers. Because at the heart
Yep.
of coaching, we're all doing research. We're starting off with a team going, I wonder how we get better. And we're trying to figure it out together. But I want the stakeholders' voices to be in there as well. So that kind of drew the idea. You and I made a decision at some point that just to maybe limit one more variable, we would try and find an organization that had those different types of teams. So we at least kept, to some degree, the organizational context at least consistent, because otherwise it's variables. And at the heart of my research, it's qualitative, it's action research. I am not claiming I can generalize my findings to every single team in the world. That would sound ridiculous. But I hope it's transferable. So whatever I found was true for those teams and for me and you in this context, but I'm hoping there's transferability to all of us as practitioners to take away some ideas. So the actual operation, the research, we worked with 3 teams concurrently. When I think back to what we did, it was kind of madness.
It was madness, but here
Yeah.
we are.
So we're both running our own practices. We had 3 teams on the go in the same organization. They roughly got about 22 or 3 hours of team coaching.
That was an interesting piece for us, wasn't it? Reflecting on what we could actually do in 20 to 22 hours. There were many challenges to the assumptions that you and I held about what made for good team coaching. But one of the first that I recall was, you can do a lot with a team in 20 hours.
Yeah, and that was over a 6-month period as well. So, I mean, they weren't always used. Some of them, there were 7-hour sessions with a team. And again, every team was different. Obviously, the content was different, but we always kept the process. So if it was team coaching session 7 out of 10, and we thought that was going to be a day long, we did that with each of the 3 teams, but obviously the content. So we kept it quite consistent. But it's not a huge amount of time. Sometimes they were just a couple of hours. We were always, other than one-to-one interviews, we were always in the room together, and that put a lot of pressure on our relationship. I mean, in my reflected chapter is the pressure they were feeling, we felt as well, because we're not just trying to deliver as team coaches. As you mentioned, we're both developing, but we also got this researcher hat on as well.
Yeah.
What about you? One of the most interesting things we had a moment where we're having our first day. As many of us will know, I mean, we go, we contract, we do the one-to-one interviews, we spoke to stakeholders. They also filled out the team diagnostic survey. So we had lots of data. We're getting ready for the big first set piece, the debrief of the diagnostic. And the morning beforehand, we met one of the leaders, and they said, our operations team can't all be in the room at the same time.
Yeah.
I remember
I distinctly recall that. Just to do a little bit of scene setting for those that are listening in and will listen later, do you want to give context to the size of the organization, the type of organization, where the organization, obviously we were in Dublin, but do you want to just put a bit of those contextual factors around the organization we were working with? And then we'll come back to that story, because it was a real moment for us. But again, it was challenging one of the assumptions that we held about team coaching.
Yeah, and I think one of the freeing things when I was wearing my researcher hat was, if a client had did that to me and said, no, we can't have all the team, I would have gone, okay, they're not really up for this. And there would be a lot of judgment, not proud of it.
It's not team coaching.
Yeah, and now they're pulling out and all that judgment and clients. As a researcher, I think we both came to a place of, okay, whatever it is, and it's all data, which has been something that stayed with me forever since that. How do I have that researcher mind on? We talk about a beginner's mindset. I think a researcher's mindset is also useful. It's all just data. Just going back to context, it's a global financial services organization headquartered in Ireland. We found these three teams within a function or division within that financial
That's
services
right. Yeah.
organization, very much a customer facing, a kind of back office customer support function within a large financial services. I don't know, there's probably about 10,000 people globally in this organization now. And I guess in that function, maybe there was three or 400, I'm guessing.
I think so. We were very fortunate because we had access to the the managing director of that
Yeah,
organization as such, and the senior leadership team that went with it, and they were championing this research. As you mentioned, it was an action research project, so they went the distance with us over a 2-year period, which was absolutely amazing. I guess that challenge that we experienced with there we are the day before the coaching was due to start with this operational team, and when you think of it, it made perfect sense, right? They had this role where clients needed to have access to this team between this period of the day from 9 till 6 or whenever their function was open, and they could not leave that function unmanned. Do you want to tell our listeners how we overcame that problem and how we went about coaching that team, just accepting it for what it was?
yeah, and it was also interesting a team. I mean, part of research is the ethics of it, and one important ethical thing is that nobody felt they had to go through the team coaching. So again, this particular team, two people kind of came to the first meeting, information meeting, and
That's
decided no.
right.
And again,
It
as a
wasn't for
researcher,
them.
you're going, oh no, now I don't have a full team, but you just get on with it. But so we ended up having to do some of the debriefing twice with different groups and helping join the dots afterwards. But I think for me, the key learning was, I think there's something that I got was when I'm engaged with a client, there's a level of anxiety or maybe even judgment or necessity that I'm demanding of them to meet my view of what being committed looks
Yeah.
like. And in this
Yeah.
situation, it wasn't a lack of commitment. It was an operational reason. And I said, the fact that maybe there wasn't money involved or I wasn't looking for an invoice, there was a sense of, okay, oh, this is going to be interesting. I wonder how we're going to do this. So I think it's that bit of that shuffle maybe that we have in the title here of having to shuffle through it. So so I guess trying to get to the core of what did I find? So
Yes.
looking at the question of how does team coaching contribute to team effectiveness? I guess the first headline to share with you is after the 6 months of coaching, 20 something hours, based on one-to-one interviews at the start and at the end, based on them completing the team diagnostic survey, each of the teams at the start and at the end, and based on interviewing stakeholders at the start. And then 6 months after the coaching ended, because we wanted to give it a bit of time, the resounding feedback was yes, the team coaching, all three teams and their stakeholders described themselves as being more effective
Yeah.
because of team coaching. So there we go. There's something we can hold on to and share with our clients in this situation. I think there's transferability. I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but these three teams, from a triangulated point of view, their one-to-one, their survey results, and the stakeholders all said yes, they're more effective. That's not the headline, though. I mean, thank goodness. It would have been a different thesis if the answer was no. I'll be probably doing something else. So then
And
the
what were
question,
they meaning by more effective? Can you
yeah. So again,
kind of share a bit? What was that
yeah. So
measurement
again,
or?
we use the work of Ruth and Richard Hackman, where we define team effectiveness as the output of the team, um, the quality of group process, and the member satisfaction. The three criteria. The
Mm,
interesting thing, though, was, well, how do they perceive it as more effective? And this is where some of the contribution comes through. So what the team spoke about, all three teams, was how the team coaching helped the quality of the intra-team relationship. Yes, it helped with other things, but that was the resounding theme. Now, two of these teams, when we first met them at that very point zero, when we first did the interviews and the team diagnostic, people described it as it's poisonous, backstabbing. We have
Toxic.
puddles, and I hate being in them. So they started from totally unpsychologically safe environments. The third team was fine enough. The stakeholders were all about don't even know that stuff. They just have to get stuff done. Two of the
Yeah.
teams just tasked. I don't care how they do it. Task, service line agreements. The third team, the strategic team, it was they do it well, but they're not connected to us. They're in a silo. So it didn't
Yeah.
start from a great place. We come fast forward 6 months for the team, 12 months for the stakeholders. The teams are all saying there's a quality of relationship here that we've never had before. And
Mhm.
there's something about team coaching helped that happen. So I'll explain more what that is in a second. But we're seeing that one of the ways that team coaching contributes is in the quality of the team relationship. Now, that goes against some other theories out there that would say, you know what, relationships come after performance. If we're a winning
Mhm.
team, we'll get on with each other. If we're not a winning team, it's not going to get any better because we like each other better. But it's not about being liked, but we helped build psychological safety. We helped build cohesion. We helped them actually see each other as people. But then the really interesting thing was when we went to the stakeholders and we asked them, are the teams effective? And they went, yes. And we said, well, how do you know? They go, it's all down to the quality of relationship between the teams and us as stakeholders.
Mhm.
So
So it
watch
started to
this.
transfer.
Yeah. So the team coaching helped the team have better relationships with each other as team members. And
Mhm.
from that, from the confidence, from them getting maybe a clearer sense of what they have to achieve, they went out and started to develop relationships with the stakeholders. And then the stakeholders who 12 months earlier were saying SLA, task, just get it done first time, are now saying, well, they're more effective because they listen to us and because they come and talk to us and we're engaged. So this, so that the link here is the effectiveness of the team was being measured by relationship. So the relationship between team coaching and team effectiveness is one part of it is the quality of relationship that we can help
Mhm.
teams have with each other and with their stakeholders. And me, that hasn't been written anywhere before. And it's almost like I use the world of team effectiveness as a counterpoint. There is very little literature in team coaching. There is thousands of articles in team effectiveness. Very quantitative. You could almost go back to Hawthorne studies. It's always been in there, but it never talks about relationships. It talks about different factors and variables. And here we're seeing that for all those lovely measurements of effectiveness, the output, the member satisfaction, we're also hearing that stakeholder relationship is a key influence on how effective a team is seen. And team coaching is one way
Isn't
of
it?
influencing that relationship. So that was probably one of the big findings out of it.
That's really, really interesting. And I can hear the energy behind that as you're sharing it. And I guess I'm curious on a number of levels, but how is that informing your team coaching practice now?
Yeah, so a few things. It's slowing me down. I mean, another finding that came out was in trying to understand, let's go back a bit to these teams as we just described. They described their own environment as poisonous, as backstabbing, as lack of trust. And here you and I come along and we contract with them, we meet them one to one, we then get to a point
Listen.
where we listen, we use their names. I remember one of them commenting, going,
Yeah.
"Gosh, you use our names. We notice who's interrupting who, and we just slow it down." So we're
Mm.
role modeling relationship. You and I mean, as we get confused, we time out and go, "What do you think we need to do next?" So we're role modeling in front of them. Okay,
Yeah.
but they were starting such a low place. Then they got some really tough feedback from themselves because people were saying it's poisonous, and from their stakeholders. But by the end of that first workshop, they were writing things in their reflections saying, that was really tough, but I sensed some hope here that we might get through it. And what I was trying to figure out, and part of my research was, what shifted that mood so early? And so this idea of a conceptualizing, we talked a lot in one-to-one coaching about the working alliance. We know
Mm.
that the quality of
Eric
relationship,
Dehan.
Eric Dehan, it comes from therapy as well. Working alliance is a therapeutic thing. Lambert and Abassi, I think, would talk about relationship is a high percentage of the outcomes. We never really talk about that in team coaching. And so I began to conceptualize that maybe what was happening was a team coaching working alliance, but that's multi-layered. That's a working alliance between you and me as team coaches, but there's also a working alliance between us and the individuals. And again, the value of doing one-to-one interviews, you get to meet the person and hear their story and you use their name. But then the working alliance between us and the team as a collective. But finally, what we're beginning to see is the working alliance between the team itself. As they leave that first debrief, and one person described it as the plaster being ripped off. And another person described it later on to the CEO as it's like being in a war zone. You had to be there. But it was tough. But you begin to see the possibility that they begin to get a bit of a bond going and a bit of mutual goal. So what helped us there was really, and what's in my practice now is how do I really focus on building that working alliance? So I'm noticing I'm being more explicit and intentional about partnership before I even get to the one-to-one interviews, partnering with the leader, partnering with the team, talking about partnership. And then again, it's now non-negotiable for me. I used to kind of flip-flop between online surveys and interviews. Interviews are part of that bonding relationship. You get to hear the person's story and hear more about where they've come from. And I think, paying attention to also building that psychological safety with everybody from the get-go. One of the other interesting findings for me was the teams had the debrief. And one of the teams, we met them again a few weeks later, and they're all asked to have a plan. And this may sound familiar to many of us. So we have this very often very emotional, powerful first session where the data comes out and they go around the room and read them and they start having conversations. And then you notice nothing happens. One of the teams we had, they went off and had a beautiful plan, very proud to show it to us. They moved on. The other two, nothing happened. And when we began to look at the journey from there onwards, each of the three teams went on a similar journey, but in different order. One had a plan, began to action it, and then had a bit of a crisis. The other two had another crisis, and then they got into the plan, and then they began to action it. And so when I was analyzing this data, I came across a concept in team effectiveness called team adaptation. And team adaptation described this very thing, that teams experience a cue or a trigger. They get stimulated to take in new data. They go plan and they act. And I'm noticing, gosh, this kind of explains what's happening, even though it's not in the same order. It's happening for these three teams. So one of the big ideas that I came out of was like team coaching. You talked about not calling it team coaching. I think it's a really interesting idea of talking to clients about this is team adaptation. Do you need your teams to be more adaptable? Now, who among us will have clients who go, no, we don't want anybody to be adaptable here. The key thing, and what team coaching does is it triggers adaptability, but it also builds adaptive muscle. And I think that's a really interesting reframing of what we're offering, because the danger is we're offering something no one's asking for. Who wakes up saying coaching? But if you say, are you interested in your team being more adaptable? And there's a linkage. Team coaching does that. The other finding, though, was why did those two teams not get to the plan? And I had this with a colleague of mine recently. They were saying, we had a tough session. We agreed actions. We came into the next session. Nothing was done. And one of my learnings from our data was, if there's not enough psychological safety, they won't get to the plan. So don't despair if they haven't got to a plan or move things through. Just stick with it, that you might work a bit harder, because unless we're really honest with each other, we're not really going to buy into forming a plan. There's still doubt. And what we found, we had one team where we met them to look at their plan. Nothing had been done. Both of us spotted quite early on there was a weird mood in the room. And I think you or me asked, what's going on here? And we discovered that they had a meeting the previous week, this is the management team, where they were asked to share resources across the teams. And it started very well because they all remembered the feedback. They were all very well listening to each other. And then it went boom. And what we got to do was help them review that meeting and what happened. So it was almost like we had to have another critical moment, another concept from one-to-one coaching to build a bit more psychological safety. And even in that session, the two protagonists started to tell each other why they were annoyed with each other, and we held that space. But that built enough psychological safety that by the next time we met them, they were able for a plan. So hoping that makes some sense.
It is like, as you describe it, it's like, the archery was cleaned out to enable them to move on, whereas there was a blockage before. So it didn't matter for those two teams how much you rationally talked about the need for them to come up with a plan or to move to action. It just wasn't going to happen until that little blockage got clered. That's how I'm hearing you.
You've changed my marketing. Team coaching as stent. We will shove a stent into your veins to help you. But yeah, there's still blockage there. And again, as a team coach, I can get frustrated, or I can start to doubt myself or doubt their commitment when they can't get to the action part. But one of the findings was they need more psychological safety. And that's, again, that was, I think, a reconceptualizing of team coaching as, if teams are to be adaptable, as you say, it's not just cognitive, there needs to be enough safety in the room. What's also interesting with that team adaptation process is they do get to plan and to act, but it's not just a task. They build confidence. When I look at those reflection sheets, they were talking a lot more about their cohesion and their confidence. And guess what? I believe that cohesion and confidence of having got through the bottleneck, gone and built a plan, into action it, gave them the confidence to go and speak to their stakeholders, which, as we've heard previously, was a major shift in how the stakeholders perceive the effectiveness of the team.
It almost gave them permission, right? Because I think I recall a time in the research where you and I were doing a focus group with a group of the stakeholders. And we noticed that as the stakeholders were arriving into the room, they were like shaking hands with each other. Oh, hi, I'm such and such, I'm such and such. Then they sat down and we started asking questions about the team. And in real time, the conversation started emerging between these stakeholders. Oh, isn't it interesting that we have all of these expectations of these teams, and we've never actually sat down in a room together and spoken about these, and how that must have been driving the team off in all of these different directions. So part of it, I don't know if this resonates with you, was it was almost kind of introducing the team to the idea of, you can have a relationship where the stakeholders, and it's a done to you, or you can have a working alliance, as you're describing, and builds that relationship where it's more of a case of, well, let's work together here in terms of what you might need from us and how we might deliver. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess all of us listening have had that experience of one-to-one coaching where at some point we're doing stakeholder mapping and we're trying to help the individual leader think about their stakeholders. And so teams are no different. And again, the work of Peter and others has always been very much, outside in, and even challenging us beyond the obvious stakeholders. 13th fairy, the stakeholder we're not thinking about. But I think there's something about, again, getting the team to get some momentum so they have the confidence and the psychological safety to go out and have those conversations with stakeholders. Because this was probably an organization where there was hierarchy. I mean, levels were important. So it wasn't like I just pop over to your desk if you're a key stakeholder. You also had that the stakeholders were in different buildings across Dublin, and probably these teams were in probably a lower grade building. There was demarcation, and so Stephen, that was
I recall you and I giving permission. This is part of our role modeling as team coaches, to say, you know what, for this session, for this discussion, hierarchy sitting the other side of that door. Do you remember that? And it changed the mood dramatically, didn't it?
Yeah.
So pick us up again now. So we've talked about this whole idea of developing the working alliance and strengthening the working alliance between the team coaching partners, between the team coach, the individuals, the team coach and the team, as a way of the team themselves developing better working alliance with each other. And then, of course, moving outside the boundary of the team to develop with stakeholders. We've talked about team coaching as a as a trigger for adaptation, and how you've now started to talk to some of your clients and leaders about this whole idea of, working with them to help the team adapt to whatever it is that the context requires of them. Do you want to pick the story up there again and share a few more little nuggets from your research?
Well, I didn't even try to bring it back to practice, because Peter Hawkins has a lovely phrase of, how do you help the team have the crisis before they have the crisis? So again, and there's a lovely idea from Amy Edmondson as she talks about psychological safety. One of the characteristics is this idea of a training space, or a training lab. But I think team coaching also is like, we're taking them. Someone once described team development as, you can bring the boat into the harbor and dry dock it, but most teams don't have that luxury. You're working with them in the middle of the ocean trying to fix the boat.
Yeah.
But I think something about team coaching where we take them off the boat for a little while, maybe into rafts, and they get to, it's a practice area, practice field, where they get to experiment and do things, and again, have the crisis, have the critical conversation. I think that's a really interesting idea of, again, maybe asking us to be a bit more brave as team coaches, that we can, yes, psychological safety is important, but how do we make that a robust practice field so that they're match fit to go back into reality? So picking up the research. So again, noticing that team coaching contributed to 3 different types of teams. So it does help operational teams, even those that can't be in the room together. It helps project teams be more effective. It helped a management team be more effective. And we already know about leadership teams. We're seeing that point. We're seeing the red thread of relationship, that there is a connection. The team effectiveness literature rarely ever thinks about team coaching, because their view is, where's the efficacy of this thing? And I think part of my contribution is showing, well, there is a link, because the stakeholder perception was changed based on the relationships, but also that link to team adaptation. Team coaching could be called team adaptation. It's doing the same things and having a similar kind of output. I guess I talked about relationships. It wasn't as true for all 3 teams. So the operational team, the stakeholder feedback was slightly different. Not so much about relationship, maybe still about tasks. So again, what I began to notice was that relational piece, where if we can help teams really build their relationship and the relationship with the stakeholder, it probably suits teams where there's a higher level of complexity and a higher level of interdependence required. The operational team, low complexity, low interdependence, they still got seen as more effective, but not in the same way. And then, finally, maybe the last kind of insight was, when I looked at the levels of psychological safety at the start, the role of organizational context. I talked about these stakeholders going very much SLAs, tasks, get it done.
Yeah.
That was a huge systemic impact on poisonous HR meetings, can't be myself here. And so I think as team coaches, the more we can do, and part of my practice now is trying to always not just speak to stakeholders, but have some focus groups with the level below and ask more about the culture of the organization. Directly, we know the leadership team doesn't sit in a vacuum, but to try and get a read a bit on that organizational culture, just so we can maybe be a bit more empathetic or understanding of what might be going on.
What's driving these decisions and behaviors? Yeah. Because I don't know if you thought that inadvertently the demand on tasks, SLAs, service agreements was almost reinforcing silos, because especially if we take the management team, where the leaders were like, well, I need to keep all my resources to myself, because I can't share my resources with you, because if I did that, then I'm not going to be able to meet all of these service agreements and these tasks.
But it also had an impact on us, I think. We had a rough enough first few months where, as I said, we're trying to run our own businesses. We're doing work together. We've got a research
young families, teaching in universities.
I think we felt that task, get it right stuff as well. So again, the value of supervision, which is probably one of my learnings. We did a bit, but we probably didn't do enough team coaching supervision together. We definitely had an academic supervisor, but I think we did our best and we did a good job working it out ourselves over some tough Sunday morning conversations. But I think watching what goes on between us as team coaches is a lot of really key data, not just for self-care, but also understand what the team, because I think we almost picked up and embody some of those pressures as well.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. It's an interesting reflection because whilst we would have engaged in team coaching supervision for our private practice, we didn't specifically take these particular cases to team coaching supervision. And as you say that now, I honestly hadn't even thought of that. We definitely missed a trick there, didn't we? That we could have actually taken the cases. But it was probably a reflection of the pressure that we were under, that we couldn't see the wood from the trees. So I'm curious now in terms of, so there's two strands, and I know we've come up to the half hour, but this is just too juicy to cut you off here. So hopefully you'll give us another 10 or 15 minutes. But I'm curious about how some of these, so you talked about it was our ability to listen, to call people by their name, to ask questions, to know when to provide structure when we needed to provide structure, things we were role modeling. Anything else that you want to say about your team coaching practice that would be useful for our listeners in terms of what else you're kind of bringing back to your team coaching practice? That's one question I have. And then how you have thought about that in terms of the design of the new course that you are doing with Peter Hawkins. Is it Catherine Carr?
Yes,
and
indeed.
a few others. Yeah. So maybe if we could navigate across those two, that would be very interesting.
So I'm gonna. I'm presuming, like everybody else, maybe there's always that thing that grabs your eye, and you begin to kind of build it into your practice. Nothing so much to do with my research, but I'm seeing huge impact. I was aware of it, but the work of John Whittington. So he's written a book somewhere behind me here, Systemic Team Code. I think it's called Systemic Constellations and something. Sorry, John.
Constellation. Yep.
Yeah, I'll get the. We can always type it in there, but John comes from a influenced by family therapy. One of his things is systems don't change unless there's acknowledgement, and there's a lovely exercise in his writings about forming a clock, and you say, okay, well, the person at 12 o'clock is the person who's longest in this team, and you let them self-select, and then 1 o'clock would be the next longest, and you may even have a gap, and you might have the next person at 5 o'clock, and then 11 o'clock is the most recent. And I've done that now since the beginning of the year. That is just a default for me in that first kind of session. It opens up so that idea of acknowledging time. And within that, so we get around and form the clock, and then I might ask the rest of the system to speak to the person at 12 or 1 or 2 o'clock and say, what do you want to appreciate about having these long-serving members? I was with one team recently, and the person at 12 o'clock was 34 years in the organization. I mean, we're never going to see the likes of that again, I'm guessing. But to not have acknowledged that, and to see this person who I'd been told might not be fully engaged in team coaching, maybe since I've seen it all before, but was they began to be acknowledged by the rest of the team, including a very new CEO, who did a great job of articulating, like, you built where we are now, and my job is to build on your work, not to change it. You could almost feel the releasing. So, and then likewise, having their clock even speak to those new members and say, what do we appreciate about you being here? You are the next, you're the legacy, you're the next custodians, you're bringing outside views. But I'm just finding that exercise, which may take 15 or 20 minutes, just as almost like a pressure release. Because one thing I've noticed about team coaching for the team, for us as team coaches, and especially in team coaching education, there is a level of anxiety. And I see it most blatant for me maybe as an educator, that anxiety of I'm a good one-to-one coach. I'm now learning with other one-to-one coaches, and give me all the tools, and what do give me all the certainties. And we're anxious because I think we realized the team is anxious. Just met a CEO yesterday. We're going to do some work, but he's very honest. He's anxious about the team is doing okay, actually. And one of his anxieties is, will this make it worse? And we talked about that and about how the team does need to step up. And if he's worried about how people would take it, he's probably not leading at his full capacity, but there's anxiety in the room. And so just that exercise alone, that idea of the clock, getting people to acknowledge the contribution from a time perspective. I've used it a few times recently, and I'm just thinking, wow, there's something really in this. Another one was with a company where the founder is still in the circle. And again, maybe for the first time ever, the team saying, thank you for the ideas. Thank you for founding this company. You can also play with it. There was a team recently where the founder's there, but the CEO was fired a year ago. They're waiting for a new one. And we did the circle, and I said, well, who are we missing from this circle that we want to acknowledge? And so we invited the old CEO figuratively back into the room, and they all thanked him or her for their contribution. And that released something as well. So before we get into the diagnostic discoveries, that exercise alone, I think that acknowledgement has a power of really relaxing the muscle. So it's just a thing I'm playing with at the moment. How is it influencing what we're doing with GTCI? I think there's a huge range of influences. There is that sense of being more relational. Even as it's a senior practitioner program, we're trying to stay away from lots of tools and models and actually invite the participants to be partners, to kind of maybe step away from participants' faculty and I'm not happy, you go solve it. And actually ask everybody to kind of I had a class in UCD a few years ago, and their catchphrase was, there's learning in the wobble. So they were having wobbles, and they have to remind, we're learning as we wobble here. So I think what we're doing is we're trying to be less expert mode and let less tools and processes. There are some models that help shape things, but really working on the individual and the quality of contact that they have with themselves and that they can have with the team. So that relational red thread is running through that program, as is the vertical development piece. So really encouraging people to try and think about, how do you move from achiever, redefining to transformational? It's not going to happen overnight, but what do you need to let go of and what do you need to embrace? So that vertical development, I think, is a really interesting, it's almost like a double helix. There's the transformation of the team and there's the transformation of me, and they go together. So almost like, what's the shift that will help the shift in the team?
Love that. It's it's an online course.
Online course, yeah. We have about 130 people from around the globe, all experienced coaches, great global faculty between Singapore, South Africa, Canada, Europe. So very, very multicultural, diverse, huge amount of energy. Peter has set us all a lovely challenge of, how do we all, faculty and participants, double our beneficial impact as team coaches? So we're now unpacking, what does beneficial impact mean, but then also, what's that shift? If I was going to double that, and not just me, but if you and I were going to double that, and you, me, and the rest of the program are going to double it, what does that involve? And I think it's that call to action of us maybe at times stepping out of coach mode and trying to really help shift that frame that we talked about.
So you've avoided participants commenting on the carpet, which is good through your virtual platform. But I'm curious about, as you ponder that question for yourself in terms of beneficial impact, here we have Colm Murphy, the executive and team coach, the educator, the researcher. I know you've been involved with setting some of the standards in the EMCC around team coaching. Like, that seems like a pretty impressive, pioneering, beneficial impact to me. And I want to, as you say, acknowledge that and give that credit where it's due. This is one thing that you have been evolving and bringing to the world of team coaching over the last 10 years. And I've certainly enjoyed and will continue to enjoy the pleasure of dancing with you. But tell me a little bit about, as you reflect? Maybe this is Melissa and Colm in real pondering philosophical mode. What's that beneficial impact?
Well, one thing I'm grappling is the word is the ecological disaster that's going on right in front of us right now. I mean, we're seeing it in Europe. We're hearing Spain. There's going to be 40 something degrees. Here we are, end of April. We're seeing extreme weather. I mean, if people think this is political, then they're missing. This is happening. We know it's happening, right? And one thing that I'm grappling with is how do I bring that into my one-to-one, but more particularly, I'm working with lots of very senior leadership teams of big organizations. How do I bring that in? And it's part of me that goes back to my training of coaching is, oh, that's your stuff, you know.
You set the agenda here.
Yeah. Don't be bringing any of your stuff in. And then another part of me, and with the help of people like Grattan Donnelly and others, is like, well, you know, when COVID was happening, I didn't stop talking about COVID. This is happening around. It's in the room, whether we talk about it or not. And I don't need to be on a pedestal lecturing people, but if I'm not asking the question, you know, what about sustainability? What about the environmental impact? How will that impact you and your talent you're attracting? How's that going to impact your engagement scores if you're not being environmentally strategic? Supply chain, what's like, you know, it's the opportunities are there, and maybe what I'm trying to grapple with is getting out of my own way that this is some big move in the coaching relationship, as opposed to no more than me talking about COVID or the football game yesterday. I mean, it's all or something on the news. It's in the room anyway. So I think that the next move is that how to take my practice above just helping an organization, but maybe the bigger beneficial impact is helping leadership teams think about the environment. None of us have the answer, but if we're not talking about it, we're missing the opportunity. And there is an ongoing thing, and you and I would have spoken about this, is democratizing of this work as well. You know, lots of people doing great work in bringing coaching into schools, one-to-one coaching, or to disadvantaged communities. But what about team coaching? You know, there's a really interesting view of coaching from Oxford Brooks about coaching being a social movement, or this, you know, and so how do we as team coaches support some of these social movements? Again, so I think there's always that thing of my audience is predominantly middle, upper class, corporate, probably all very homogenous in many ways, and there's a bit of me thinking, okay, I want to do more with something different here than just that. Can't just be my legacy. I want to try and push this out and give more people to benefit from it.
Fabulous.
Don't know any ideas, do shout.
Well, we as that evolves and as you hold that inquiry, of course, you're always a very welcome guest, and I want to just bring us to a wrap up here, and to say thank you for sharing with us and bringing together so eloquently the ability to pull that practitioner, scholar practitioner, which is much needed in the field of team coaching, and you know, I'm very sure that it will inspire other team coaches or other practitioners to go off and get involved in different forms of research to further this discussion. And when you draw it back to this idea of beneficial impact and the opportunity that we have as team coaches to find ourselves in these rooms with leadership teams and senior leadership teams, or in environments where we potentially could, address some of the societal inequalities that we see going on all around us, it does feel like important work. So I thank you very much for being with us, for sharing with us so generously. Are there any parting words you'd like to share around the wild, the innocent, and team coaching shuffle to
What do I have to say about that? Go back to Springsteen. I think Springsteen is a bit of a motivation as well. I think there's something about not just him, but watching any artist, and I know a lot of his stagecraft is based on James Brown, but I think there's something about also us as coaches. There's a level of performative nature about what we do because there's a group there, but I'm always struck by the great performers, their ability to move the energy around. So whether they hit you with the first 5 fast songs, but then being able to switch and change the tempo. And I think there's also something about leaving it all out there on the stage, right? You're not thinking, oh, he's gone after an hour. It wasn't really. I think us being fully engaged in the work and bringing all ourselves, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. So no, that's it for me. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for having me, Melissa and Krista, and happy weekend for everybody. Hope you have a nice break.
All right. Take care of yourself. Look forward to talking again.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.